Texas's fourth AP Top 25 matchup taking place this Saturday in Austin as Kansas State comes into town. This is the Horns 24/7 game preview. He's Chip Brown. I'm Tommy Yarsh. Thanks for being here with us. Chip, let's go ahead and jump right into this one. Last year's meeting, Texas wins it 34-27 in Manhattan. Texas has won the last 6 against Kansas State, and this season the Wildcats averaging 37.4 points per game. Chip, it feels like Chris Kleiman may be due here in this one, but obviously this is a game of unknowns, and Texas has had a lot of success against the Wildcats. Steve Sarkisian's won his first 2 games against them. This year, a whole different story, though, because he's on his backup quarterback. Quinn Ewers not expected to play, so it'll be Malik Murphy for a second straight week. And one of the things on offense that Texas struggled to do last week with Murphy and has struggled to do with Ewers too is finishing drives. How important is it for Texas to be able to finish in the red zone and on the goal line, as opposed to when they were just 2-5 last week? And that's been an area of concern all season long.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like it's now in the heads of the Texas Longhorns, and that is not good. It might be in the head of Steve Sarkisian, because when you look at this situation, Texas only converting 16 touchdowns in 33 red zone trips. That's 48.5%. That's 120th in FBS. And then you look at Kansas State, who's converted 33 touchdowns in 40 red zone trips. That's 82%. And that is number 2 in FBS. So right then and there, it tells you that Texas has got to get this figured out. We say this every week, Tommy. I mean, it's to the point now where I'm like, just put Malik Murphy under center, put Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat behind him, and just do the brotherly shove, because that way everybody's at least firing forward and not, moving side to side. They just, or throw it more to A.D. Mitchell in the red zone, a bigger target, a stronger target, or Jordan Whittington. It's crazy that Steve Sarkisian, who's such a good play caller, play scripter, hasn't been able to come up with plays that this team can execute, and B, that this team hasn't been able to execute in the red zone. So it cost them the Oklahoma game. You don't want it to cost you your goals this season, because as we said, after the loss to OU, there is no margin for error. There's now a 5-way tie atop the Big 12, and Kansas State is looking like one of the 2 best teams in the Big 12. I think Texas is absolutely the other one, and playing this game at home with 100,000 cheering them on should help, but they didn't finish 3 drives last week against BYU. And I think this week, Steve Sarkisian will kick field goals in those situations. He waited until Texas was up 21-6 against BYU before, trying to help his team get over the hump in some of these red zone situations. Obviously, one of those failed red zone trips was a strip sack of Malik Murphy in the first half. And that was alarming. Because, Steve Sarkisian said on Monday, Malik Murphy not used to getting hit in practice. So he may have thought he had more time to get his arm up to throw with a defensive end crashing in on him. But yeah, Texas has got to figure out a way to finish drives in the red zone. We're in week 9, so just try something that gives your players confidence and helps them to impose their will on opposing defenses in the red zone.
Chip, we thought this was a hurdle that they got over in Houston. They scored on every red zone trip, even though it was a narrow victory, but then it reared its ugly head again last week. So, like you mentioned, Steve Sarkisian, I don't think has a choice this week. He has to take the points if he can't get into the end zone and put the field goals through. Kansas State, way too good of an offensive team to leave points on the board and allow them to climb back into a game or climb into a bigger lead. But what we really think is the marquee matchup in this game is the Texas defensive line against the Kansas State offensive line. Kansas State's O-line has been one of the best units in the country. Texas, I think, has an argument for the best defensive line unit in the country with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy there in the middle. K-State has the number 5 rushing offense in the country. Kansas State Texas number 14 rushing defense. Chip, it seems like this is where the game is going to be won early on, a couple days out. Which side do you lean towards?
Yeah, I mean, Texas has been so good against designed running plays. And the only team that's run for 200 yards on Texas this season, and it was 201 yards, was Oklahoma. And 113 of those yards came from quarterback Dylan Gabriel, with about 100 of those yards purely scrambles, in which he was able to get out of the pocket, find a lane, and crease the Texas defense for big yards. Remember, he had a 44-yard run in that game, but no one else has been able, through a designed running game. Kansas's option attack didn't give Texas problems. This is going to be the stiffest test that Texas has faced, though, because of Kansas State's offensive line. I mean, they return all their starters. They have Cooper Beebe, the All Big 12 center guard. I think he's playing guard now. But these guys have played a lot of football together. They believe in each other. And with the quarterback run game, it puts the defense at a disadvantage. So I expect the Texas defense to handle business. But I think back to a couple of years ago in this game, and both teams ran for 200 yards. And it was a battle, 22-17 in Austin. I could see a similar type game playing out, but the Texas defense, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, they're better than what Texas had on the defensive line 2 years ago. So I think this is the marquee matchup in this game. Whoever wins that line of scrimmage, I think probably wins the game. So this is a big challenge for the Texas defensive front, defensive line to contain K-State's running game. Because if you shut down that running game and make K-State one-dimensional, they don't have the weapons. They don't have the means to win in a shootout. So I think it would definitely be check mark to Texas at that point.
Chip, we were talking about this before we started recording, and those watching, you can let us know if you agree with us or not. It kind of coming into this game, it just kind of gives the same vibe as TCU last year, where you just kind of really don't know what you're going to get. Last year was really two high-powered offenses as well, and two defenses that had played relatively well. This year it's kind of a whole different story where both defenses have played really well and both the other offenses have been up and down all year. So really interesting to see how that works out. And I do agree with you in the sense that the Texas defensive line is much better than it was not only a year ago, but 2 years ago too. And the other thing that's different for Texas coming into this game is the fact that they're on their backup quarterback in Malik Murphy, whereas Kansas State has two guys they can go to in Will Howard and Avery Johnson. So going back to Malik Murphy now, played good but not great, I think would be the accurate way to sum it up in his first game. Turned the ball over twice. We certainly know that can't happen in this game if Texas wants a shot. What other kind of help is Malik Murphy going to get? Obviously, Jonathan Brooks going to be the biggest thing for him. If Jonathan Brooks has a great game, makes his job pretty easy. But what other things is this Texas team going to have to do to take some of the work off of his plate?
Well, go back to the last two wins over Kansas State, and there is a common thread. A stud running back carrying the football 30 times. Last year, it was Bijan Robinson, 30 carries for 209 yards. He had a 36-yard touchdown to start the scoring. He had a 68-yard run that helped set up a field goal. And then 2 years ago, in that 2021 game I just referenced, you had Roschon Johnson with Bijan Robinson injured with that hyperextended elbow. Roschon Johnson carried it 31 times for 179 yards and a 9-yard touchdown to start off the scoring. And that's that means it's Jonathan Brooks' time. You hit on it, Tommy. You can't look, young quarterbacks seeing their first significant meaningful game action, make mistakes where they throw the ball where the receiver should be, even if the receiver didn't run the route, and it turns into an absolutely egregious interception like we saw from Malik Murphy instead of taking the sack. And then in the red zone, we saw him raise his arm, maybe because he's not used to getting hit in practice, thinking that's what Steve Sarkisian said on Monday, thinking he would have the time to get that pass off when he's got a defensive end crashing in on him, turns into a strip sack and 18-yard loss on the play. Not just a fumble, but an 18-yard loss and a fumble. If Malik Murphy makes those kinds of mistakes on Saturday, it could cost Texas the game, their Big 12 championship hopes. That's why I'll be shocked if Steve Sarkisian doesn't build this game plan around Jonathan Brooks, who's shown he is a back who gets stronger as the game goes on. He can handle the load. I don't think he's carried the ball enough. I mean, you look at Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon. He's carried it, back-to-back games where he carried it 29 times. And he's now the nation's leading rusher based on what he's done really the last 4 games. That has totally turned Oklahoma State's season around. And I bet Ollie Gordon carries it 25 to 30 times against OU on Saturday. But yeah, I think this is a 30 carry game for Jonathan Brooks, maybe 25, and spread some carries to CJ Baxter, who looks good and healthy. Jaden Blue, Keelan Robinson, but Jonathan Brooks has been your unsung hero on offense in 2023. So ride your offensive MVP in the biggest game of the season right now without your starting quarterback.
All right, Chip, it's time for everyone's favorite segment of the show, game predictions. I'll let you go first.
Well, I see this, like I said, I see this game being very similar to the game 2 years ago, where both teams probably run it for 200 yards. I think it's going to be a crazy last minute game. Could be a Bird Auburn game, but I'm going to give Texas the edge barely, 22-20. How about you, Tommy?
All right, so you have it as a Bird Auburn game. I do too. I think it's a little bit more high scoring, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was more of a defensive bout, like you put it. I just think that at some point these offenses are going to find their niche and get points on the board, frankly. So I'm saying, going back to this game, 5 out of the last 6 matchups between Kansas State and Texas have been one possession games. I think that's the case again this year, but I think the Longhorns get it done 31-28, keeping the Longhorns on their streak of scoring at least 30 points on offense in every single game they've played this year, which is a sneaky stat that I was able to find out last week. So that's going to do it for our Horns 24/7 game preview. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you are the first to know when new content heads your way. Once again, thanks for joining us. For Chip Brown and the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yarsh. We'll see you next time.